Hi, welcome to Talk About the Passion. This is episode 10 of the podcast, which means nothing really. Just that I've now released 10 of these. And this 10th one's a doozy. I've loved every episode I've done so far, at least the ones that have a guest. And, everyone's been interesting to talk to, and the feedback from friends and strangers alike has been great. So I thank the listeners, but especially the guests I've had. They've all made the episodes interesting. I make like a skeleton, and they add pretty much the soul and meat of the episode, I guess you could say. Most of these conversations I've given the guest a little idea of, things we can talk about, a few days before I meet them, and mainly just to do that, give us sort of a skeleton or a path to travel down without rambling off too much or, going on to tangents. The more I do with these, though, the more I think it's fine to go off on, different directions. Focus is good for some situations and conversations, but it's not necessary. With that said, though, my guest today is Kevin Patey. You may know Kevin from the band The Raging Teens, or you might know him as Jittery Jack. I don't think I could have asked for a more interesting and focused guest. As you'll see in the episode, I didn't have to do too much talking and ask too many questions. I think he pretty much understood what I'm trying to do with these conversations. Get a person to sort of tell a story of, how they got where they are creatively or, developed whatever lifelong passion they have. Kevin, pretty much started it growing up in England and hearing music on the radio as a kid. And then, coming to Massachusetts surrounded by dudes with, popped collars listening to Foreigner and the Eagles or whatever. And then he talks about the rockabilly scene in Boston in the 80s and 90s, and goes into how the Raging Teens formed, and and then working with the Raging Teens with his ex-wife, folk singer Mary Lou Lord, and and then just up to now where he's working under the name Jittery Jack, and Kevin's another hilarious person and an amazing storyteller. I don't want to get too into it here because there's some seriously funny fucking stories he tells on here. Anyway, the Raging Teens are no longer a steady working band. But they are playing a show this coming weekend. If you're listening to this the day I release this, December 9th at Great Scott in Alston, Mass., which is also a record release party for the teens who are releasing a single called The Drinking Age, which he talks about where that title comes from. And that's on Swell Tune Records, who are also putting this holiday party together. And also in the bill are Bloodshot Bill, Sean Mencher, and Nate Gibson, who is also releasing a record on Swell Tune. And again, this is December 9th, 2017. At Great Scott in Alston, Mass., and the show again is put together by Swell Tune Records, so you should definitely check this out if you're into, rock and roll, roots music, rockabilly, that kind of thing. It should be great. And Kevin also has a website for Jittery Jack that's just jitteryjack.com, and it looks like it's pretty up to date, and there's a lot of stuff on there, including a place where you can buy some of his music, as well as something I actually completely forgot to ask him about on the podcast, but that's his. He had this TV show, I think it was called Having a Time with Jittery Jack, where he was interviewing people from the rockabilly world and that kind of thing, and I thought it was great. So hopefully he'll address that or let people know what's going on with that, because that was pretty awesome. And as for this podcast, one last thing before we get into it, a couple new things here. First of all, you can find me on Google Play now, as well as Stitcher. So if you use those, however you find your podcast on those, you should be able to find me on there if you just look me up, I guess. I have a Facebook page for this podcast. That's facebook.com/tatppodcast.com. And then there's the Podbean page, which is Talk About the Passion, podbean.com. And you can contact me there if you want to be on the podcast, or if you know of someone who should be. And you can always leave me a review on iTunes, which I appreciate seeing those. And you don't even have to write anything. You can just, click however many stars you think this podcast is worthy of. My Facebook page also takes reviews as well, and I'm actually pretty familiar with doing reviews on Facebook, but that's a whole other thing. So you have all these website addresses and dates I just threw at you. If not, I'm just going to sit here and read all of them over again. So, no, I'm just kidding. So let's get into this episode, and thanks again for listening. And here's Kevin Patey. Thanks. So I'm here with my friend Kevin Patey in beautiful Manchester by the Sea here. Where does Casey Affleck live? Does he live?
He's only allowed to come into town and make movies. He's not allowed to reside here. He apparently gets a little handy with the ladies. Yeah, that's the word around town. I guess. I don't know. I'm kidding. Kidding, Casey.
Anyway, sorry about that. So you grew up in England?
Yes. Well, I was born in England, and I moved there I lived there till I was 12. Yep. And then I moved here to Manchester by the Sea. Mm-hmm. And I guess you were asking me to give a little background on my music.
Yeah. So when you were a kid, did you have like a family member or friends or?
Kind of. Well, music was always a really big thing in my family because my dad had been like an amateur guitar player, and he had been in a band. But he wasn't very good, so they actually fired him and made him the manager. Yep. So and they were called Persian Wood. Oh, nice. It was the '60s, Yeah. So he was always very into music, and my grandfather, who's actually was a really neat guy, he was a massive music fan, and I think that he's a guy that probably would have been a musician, except he lost his hand in a wood saw when he was like 13 in 1930 or something like that. So there was no putting hands back on back then. So he had like a nub, essentially. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But he loved to dance and he loved music. In fact, many years later, after my grandmother passed away, we were at the house going through stuff, and I was going through all his records, of which and when he ended up passing away, I have a lot of his records. But we were going through stuff, and he had a bunch of 8-tracks, and there was Umma Gumma by Pink Floyd. Oh, yeah. And I was like, why do you have this? He goes, I look kind of interesting. He goes, it's kind of weird, but I like it. And I was like, this is really weird.
That's their weirdest record,
that's too. Did not expect to see that one in your stack. But, so music was always a big thing. And then I think just being a kid in England, the radio, at least back then, I don't know what it's like now, but back then it was, the radio was really great in the sense of like, even like the main radio stations, of which there weren't many back then. There was a little bit of independent radio, kind of like the TV. Right. And you'd have like Radio 1 would just be playing music all day, and they'd play like they play a Beatles song, of course. Right. And then they'd play like the latest, Bucks Fizz, disco record. Right. Followed by like Buddy Holly. So it was just like really weird, and there was always like, radio was kind of cool in that sense because most of the stuff that you were hearing for newer stuff, you might not be that into, but it was kind of cool to hear all this great stuff, And we'd go on road trips a lot. And my dad had like the Buddy Holly and the Crickets. I think it's like 20 greatest hits. I have the album upset, but it was like a cassette. I remember we went on a vacation, and that was like one of 3 that he had. It was in rotation, so like all those songs just stuck with me. So that was always probably my first love, was like early rock and roll. Even though I was hearing other stuff, there was something about that music that drew me in. And then I remember being about, probably about, it would have been probably 7 or 8. Mm-hmm. And we used to watch Top of the Pops on Thursday night because back then you had BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV, independent television, which was the only other channel. There was no cable. There was nothing else. Right? You had 3 channels. And so Top of the Pops was a big deal because it was like, they played like the top 10 hits of the week. Yeah. And music videos were just starting to happen. Right. And I remember watching, and this band came on this song, and I was just blown away to the point where I had to, because you didn't have a VCR in it. You just only could remember it, and I was able to get the name. And I made my mom take me to town that weekend, and I bought it with my own money. First record I bought with my own money was Madness Absolutely. Oh, yeah. And the album was, it was the song Baggy Trousers. Yeah, yeah. Which still I get a kick out of watching the video. Yeah, so yeah. I became like, I'm like 7, 8 years old, get super into like early like second wave ska stuff, like the two-tone stuff, Specials, Madness, English Beat, all those bands. I was really into that.
Yeah.
And from there, I got into like kind of like the mod music stuff. So when I went to live with my dad when I was about 9 or 10, and I was there for almost 4 years, 3 or 4 years, and I started getting really into this whole mod thing because the Jam were really big then, and so I was super into Paul Weller, but I liked the Who and the Small Faces and all that stuff.
Right.
But I always really liked the old rock and roll stuff, and so when I came to the States, it was a little bit of a culture shock because well, you grew up in Swampscott, which is not that different than Manchester. It was suddenly there was like I used to go to like a Wednesday night disco, which was like for underage kids.
Yeah.
And it was highly stylish.
Yeah.
And I come to Manchester by the Sea, and it's like popped Izod collars and like bad corduroys and stuff. And I'm like, oh man,
So this was the '80s. We're around the same.
Yeah,
age,
like 83, 84.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm like, oh man, alive, So that was a big wake up. But because of that, I started hanging around and gravitating towards people that like music.
Yeah.
So I got turned on to stuff I'd never heard of, but like classic rock stuff, like I like the Who, but I like the earlier stuff, and I started listening to the older stuff, and then I'm getting into like Zeppelin. I grew up in England, I never even heard of Led Zeppelin, until I moved to America. Go figure. And then, I've always thought I think I've always enjoyed like kind of running with the gang a little bit, like being with a group of like-minded people that are really like-minded shit. I always when I had an older sister in England who was very much into like she liked a lot of like first wave like oi punk stuff. So I liked a lot of like the Clash, and I liked Stiff Little Fingers was a big band, but I liked. Then she got like goth and got really into like Bauhaus and like Soft Cell was her big. Unfortunately, I know every Soft Cell song off like the first 2 records because, English house back then, there's like the one bathroom, and she put the record on when she went to take her bath. And my bedroom was in the attic, so I had to listen to the whole damn thing. I think sometimes she paid me to go turn the record over or something like that. So that's tattooed in my brain. Yeah. So anyway, I come to America, and I'm getting exposed to this weird like classic rock stuff, but I knew a little bit more than the average guy in town about punk rock. So I would turn people into like the Clash. Yeah. And so I started kind of like getting more and more into punk rock. But the weird thing for me, because I've been listening to some of your podcasts here, I'm going to, for the record here, I'm not going to say I don't entirely dislike it, because there certainly are some songs that I grew to appreciate through the years. I could never get into hardcore. I never understood it.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends like that are...
I was a sucker for a song,
Right.
And I was like, well, what the hell is this all about? I mean, there are some standout tunes that are great, like Murphy's Law and stuff, but like... But I just could never really get into that. So I was like, I was in this like weird conundrum of being like the punk rock kid. Of course, I'm at that age now where my buddies that are into music are all getting into like smoking weed and taking acid. Right. And what goes hand in hand with that? Grateful Dead shows, dude. Right? Free love and all. Yeah. Right?
I think we maybe talked about you.
Oh yeah.
We're into them because I also had a Grateful Dead.
Oh yeah,
phase
it's a phase, man. But you know what? To this day, I do still like the Dead.
Yeah, same here.
Back then, it was like I liked to go to the show because it was like a big experience thing. Yeah. And I was like, oh, the records are kind of like, they're not great. They're kind of shit. Now I'd rather the records because there's not like a 19-minute heroin-induced guitar solo that's awful in the middle of it, It's just the song. And there are some great songs there, And I think that was probably a catalyst for getting into like a lot of roots music too, because they would... be it country stuff or old-timey stuff or early rock and roll stuff, they were covering a lot of tunes like that, albeit maybe not the best. But so that was kind of re-exciting my interest in that. And, I think it was a very short phase, couple of years probably. So by the time I went off to college, I had cut my hair again, and I was back into like... And I moved to Boston. I remember this, too. Part of the reason why I probably didn't like hardcore and stuff is because living up here... We were just far enough away that we couldn't really get the radio stations from Boston, other than like BCN and the big stations. I couldn't get like, the college stations. Occasionally, I could get like WMWM. Yeah. And I remember if like the weather was just right, I might get like, MFO. Right. And I remember hearing I remember with my cassette, my boombox recording the shows and being like, hearing like, surfing in Dorchester Bay, and these I was like, this stuff's kind of cool, but it seemed like a million miles away. Right. I started going into town as I got older, go to Harvard Square and stuff, and I go buy records. But I was like, at that point, I just felt like I wasn't a hardcore kid, so I didn't really get that. Right. And I did go to some shows with the Rat,
Yeah.
And see somebody, because I had friends that were into it. But when I got to college in '88, suddenly I was just like, okay, I want to be in a band. I want to I want to go out. I want to see shows. And I was out seeing shows all the time. I go to the Rat. I got really into the Deb Milkman because I thought they were they were so funny, right?
Yeah.
And I thought it was musically kind of cool, and they were always I've always been a fan of like the funny stuff. So I'll go see the Deb Milkman a lot.
Right.
But then I started getting into like hanging around with people, Boston people. The Boston's were just starting to happen.
Yeah.
Then, so that was kind of fun because I kind of knew them indirectly.
Yeah.
Through going to shows and meeting people that knew them. I started dating this girl. I dropped out of college, and I moved into a house in Mission Hill with like 6 other guys.
Yeah.
Purely with the intent of like starting a band.
Yeah.
Which sort of failed miserably because no one lived in the house liked the same shit. Like
right.
my buddy Eric, super into like that whole indie rock thing that was starting to happen then, like Buffalo Tom and Joe Jr. And I fucking hated that stuff. You know? In hindsight, Buffalo Tom, I think they have some good songs.
Yeah.
Still, Jay Mascis is a nice enough guy. I've actually met him a couple times, but I don't get that, man. I was, it's just not my thing.
Yep.
And so I could never get into that. I just like to have a good time. I didn't want it to be too serious. It just seems so serious, you know. And then. And the hardcore thing seemed really serious. That's probably why I like the Dead Milkman.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I started hanging around this bar, Fathers 2.
Oh, yeah.
Outside of Kenmore Square.
Yeah.
Sunday night was like bad hair night, they called it, because all the punk rock kids would hang out there, right?
Yeah.
So I met a bunch of guys in that scene, like my friend Dana Stewart, who later was in the Racketeers. But he played with John Felice in the Devotions.
Yep.
So I got to meet Felice and like that kind of like first generation punk rock guys.
Yeah.
And then some of the O'Halloran brothers.
Nice.
And then I joined Miss Xana Don't in the Wanted,
all right.
which was like Boston's kind of country band at the time.
Yeah.
And when I originally joined the band, it was like Johnny O'Halloran on bass, Stiggs McCormick on guitar, Dana was on drums. There was a chick called Mary Ellen who played the fiddle.
Yeah.
I don't really remember who else was in the band, but they all quit pretty soon after.
Yeah.
But I decided I really like being in a band. I'm going to stay, and I actually got a bunch of guys. I knew Jay Akari, who had been the second round Moving Targets guy.
Yeah.
Got him on drums, and my buddy Billy Hoare on bass, and this guy Pete Fair, who's a smoking guitar player, which was a big relief for me because I had been the lead guitar player at that point, which is not a good thing because I wasn't really very good.
Yeah.
So Pete Fair came in. He's like a ringer, you know. So I was like, all right, well, this is cool. I just get to play my chords now and have fun. You know, I'm like single guy in the city. I'm like 21.
Yeah.
I can just meet chicks and have fun. This is great.
That's what it's all about, man.
It was a big catalyst back then for sure, you know. But me and Dana spent a lot of time together back then. So we start getting into like, you know, we both like punk rock stuff. He was definitely more into the hardcore thing, but he also liked the Dead. So we had that in common.
Huh.
But we liked a lot of, you know, he knew a lot about music, and he was starting to get into like, I knew like my core guys, like, you know, your Gene Vincents and your Chuck Berry and Jerry Lee Lewis and stuff like that. But he was starting to like be like, hey, check this out, and we're starting like going through like the Sun Records catalog, and then finding guys like Hewlin Duvall and like really going down the wormhole of like 50s rock and roll and I guess rockabilly, you know.
Yep.
And then we met like a couple like-minded people, like John Porth, who was John ended up being in the Racketeers, and he was in the Conks too.
Yep.
And there was a whole crew of us, and we used to go see the Cranktones.
Yep.
Play at they play the Midway, or they play the Brendan Bean, and I was living in JP at the time.
Yeah.
And we would that was kind of a nucleus for me of like the whole that was like the seed of like the Boston rockabilly movement, if you will, in the early 90s to the mid 90s, just going to see those guys, and all of us trying to like figure out like we want to be in a band.
Yeah.
But none of us were really that good, and we're going to go see like Little Frankie, who's great. You know what I mean? And we're like, oh well, how are we going to do this? You know. But bit by bit, people started coming into the picture. Like Tom Umberger came in, who was like from Virginia and a great guitar player.
Yeah.
And you know, and so bands started forming, and you know, suddenly it was just like the right time.
Yeah.
Like that indie rock thing was boring to a lot of people, and you know, a lot of people were kind of getting out of the punk rock thing and being like, you know, feel a little silly about
the hardcore scene at that point. I at the end of the 80s, I pretty much went from like being a skinhead to Dead shows. Like I still had like a shaved head. Yeah. Wearing like a Bruises shirt to like a
Dead show. You know, so you kind of get out of that thing. And so I think I like to have a good time, you know.
Yeah,
and I was
it's
like,
too serious. Like you were
this
saying
is
before.
a really fun thing, and like everything else was really serious, which is ironic because I ended up marrying like a chick who was like extremely immersed in the entire
Yeah,
indie
yeah.
rock thing. But so we start this band, and it just was, I think, the right time. And
Yeah.
the '90s in Boston was great. So anytime a band would come through town, we'd have a whole bunch of people go, and then we start our own bands, and
Yeah.
we'd open for like Big Sandy, or
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Dick Dickerson and guys like this that are coming through town, and we're like, our whole thing was like, let's take care of them and put Boston on the map, and which we did in the '90s. The Boston scene was great, and what I liked about it too was it was all sorts. It was like, there was like punk rock guys and skinheads,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
hippie dudes, and
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
like, it was just a good time. You like
Yeah.
music, you come out, you have a good time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that was kind of fun, and
Yeah.
I'm rambling on now.
Oh, no,
I'm getting into the midst of my musical career. Where did the time go? Where did the years go? So that was a lot of fun, and then I formed the. I wanted to be in the Racketeers really badly because they were like the kind of up and coming band, and they were kind of cool, and I really wanted to be in the band. And Dana was my buddy, and there's this dude John Porth who ended up being in the Conks.
Yeah.
He and I were kind of vying for the same position of being like rhythm guitar player in the Racketeers.
Yeah.
And they picked him over me, and I remember I was really pissed about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Dana said to me, he goes, we need more bands. Like, you're wasted in this band. You got to start your own band, which I thought was just a line at the time. But
Right.
in hindsight, he might have been right.
Yeah.
And John was really, really, and still is to this day, extremely knowledgeable about music. So I think for them, like, he was a huge asset because he could bring a lot of cover stuff to the table, and and he was a fun guy and pretty animated. So I was like, all right, well then, I'm gonna start my own band then.
Yeah.
So I actually started a band with me and Jack Hanlon from the Amazing Crown started a band called the Loudermilk Brothers.
Yeah.
That was just me and Jack.
Yeah.
But we would have like a guest guitar player. Like we had Little Frankie a couple times, which was such a treat to be like, wow, this is the guy who's in the Cranktones. He's going to play with us now. And
Yeah.
Kevin Stevenson, who was from the Shods.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he had been in a band called the Invaders, which was their rockabilly band.
Okay.
Kevin would play with us sometimes.
Yeah.
And then Jack had a buddy, which is really bad because I'm going back, 25 years now, but I'll have to ask Jack because I don't remember the guy's name. But he played guitar and he played banjo too, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
And then we got this dude, Victor, who was an old buddy of ours, this former skinhead guy.
Oh, I remember
really
Victor.
like that.
Victor. Yeah.
That guy, yeah.
I remember him. He was.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
the guy.
Anyway, yeah.
Former skinhead kid,
Yeah,
right? He bought himself a washboard.
His
And we were
voice.
like, this is hilarious. We want Victor in the band. But he actually had a pretty good time, and he bought a snare
Yeah.
drum, too, and he learned how to kind of play it. So we're like, that's it. You're in the band. So
Yeah.
so we ended up, we started playing out, almost playing some shows and stuff. And but Jack was in the Amazing Royal Crowns, or whatever the heck they were at that point. And, that band was starting to kind of really take off. So Jack was like, obviously, this is a hobby thing. If I'm in town, fair enough. So we had a gig booked at the Linwood with it was like a December show, like December 6th or something weird.
Yeah.
And Dana's like, do you and Jack want to do a show? We're like, yeah. So it was like the Racketeers. I think the Cranktones were on the bill. I forget. It was like kind of like a big Christmas party show.
Yeah.
And then like, I'd actually been living up in New Hampshire at the time.
Yeah.
Because I'd had a falling out with my my ex-wife, so I was staying with a buddy of mine up there.
Yeah.
And I'd gone to Indianapolis to this festival, and I met a couple crazy guys out there. This guy Jim Gove and Keith Schubert,
Okay.
and they were from New Hampshire. So when I'm living in Dover, I'd hang out with these guys. It turns out Keith plays the drums and Jim played the bass.
Yeah.
So we get together and start jamming. So we got this little band going, but I was like, I'm really not very good at guitar. And I said, I already decided we need to get a good guitar player so I don't have to do it.
Yeah.
And I just want to sing and play rhythm guitar. So we're like, well, we got this friend, and they're pretty good, but they're a chick.
Right.
And I was like, well, I don't care. Can they play? But like, yeah. So I remember we used to rehearse in Jim's basement.
Yeah.
He still lived at his parents' house. And Amy came over,
Yeah.
like this like kind of like tough chick attitude and leather jacket, kind of like a little bit punk rock hair.
Yeah.
That might have had like purple in it or something. And
Yeah.
she's got like this really shitty Fender solid state crappy amp.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this like Epiphone Les Paul. And she plugged it in, and it sounded terrible.
Yeah.
But I could tell she could really play,
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. And she was really young. She was 18,
Yeah.
So I was like, well, this is really cool. So I said, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to get together tomorrow, whenever the hell it was. I said, I'm going to bring my amp and my guitar.
Yeah.
So I brought like my Fender amp and my Telecaster. And I said, just try playing through that. And it was like, bum. It was like the big band moment. I was like, oh my God, And we weren't very good. I mean, Keith was 18 too, I think at the time. And he his timing was a little wackadoo. Jim was quite good.
Yeah.
But we started working on this thing. I was like, well, if we can get a set together, I can pull some strings and we can play Boston,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm connected down there, right? So I got the show with Jack, and then like 2 weeks before, Jack's like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
The Crown's got something out of town. I got to go. And I'm like, oh, man, I was really bummed. So I said, I asked these guys, I'm like, do you guys want to play a show in Boston? They're like, well, you think we could do that? I was like, yeah, that's fine. So, but we didn't have a name, So I remember I had been talking to Dana and John Porth about that I met these kids in New Hampshire,
Yeah.
And I'm like probably 25, 26.
Yeah.
But they were young, like 18. Jim was 21. I remember that because he and I could go out drinking. But Keith and Amy were like 18 or 19 or something like that.
Right.
By this point, and we didn't have a name for the band. So John Porth is the one that said, because we used to be really in this compilation record of New England rock and roll. It was a whole series. There was, I think there's 4 or 5 now, but back then there was like I think 3, and they're called the Raging Teens. They put out Norton Records.
Okay.
So we're out having drinks, and Dana's like, well, I got to make a flyer for the show. What the hell is this band called?
Yeah.
And Porth goes, the Raging Teens. And Dana's like, I love it. So we became the Raging Teens.
Nice.
And Keith and Amy hated it. Yeah. Because they were underage. So they're going to know we're not old enough to drink.
Right.
So we played the show, and I actually just found a crappy high 8 tape of the first show.
Oh, really?
I don't have a high 8 camera, so I'm trying to find one so I can source it out. Yeah. But we played at the Linwood.
Nice.
And I remember it was... we weren't very good, but people really liked it. And I remember after the show, little Frankie from the Cranktones came up to me and said, you're the best rockabilly band in Boston. I'm like, all right, now you're clearly being funny.
Right.
He goes, no. He's like, you don't understand. He goes, I have to try and forget everything I know to play this music because this is teenage music.
Right.
He goes, and I've been playing the blues and stuff. He's probably, his late 40s at that point, whatever. But he was like, I have to try and forget all I know to play this. He goes, and these are kids out of the... New Hampshire's like the, hillbilly equivalent of the Northeast, right? It's like, we're like the deep south of the Northeast up there, right?
Yeah.
So these kids were kind of hillbillies in their own way, right?
Yeah.
Amy, certainly, she had an unusual childhood. So they asked us if we would open for them, and they had this new band called the Spurs, a Western swing band.
Yeah.
So we already had like a second gig, and we're like, well, this is great. So that was 96.
Were you doing covers or mostly?
Mainly covers? Yeah. Back then, it was the first show was definitely all covers. But I started, I'd already gotten into writing some songs with the Loudermilk Brothers thing. So I was like, okay, I can write songs. This is going to be so I just started writing songs, and I think within, it was just the right time. Like I said, the rockabilly thing was starting to happen in Boston. These kids were young, so I think that helped.
Yeah.
And plus having Miss Amy in the band was always cool because she's she'll hate me for saying this, but she's super cute, but she can play like there's no tomorrow, right? So people were just blown away, like, who is this young chick playing? Like, how does she even know about this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So it was fun. So we did that for, we ended up, Jim left and we got Matt Murphy on bass. Jim was only there, I think he might have been there for like the first year.
Yeah.
And then we were going to go on tour, and he was like, I can't go on tour. I'm at college, and I'm almost done, and I'm not dropping out. Meanwhile, I feel bad because I convinced Amy to drop out of college. She had 1 semester left.
Really?
Of which she never went back.
Really? Still to this day?
Yeah, and I think the credits are like useless at this point, so I think every once in a while she likes to remind me of that. But, I was like, well, think of the fun life we've had, So at that time, I'm back with my ex-wife, who was indie rock chick, Mary Lou Lord.
Yep.
She was getting signed to Sony Records at that time, so it was kind of a cool time because we had she's making a record, like a real record, going to L.A. at Sunset Sound,
right.
Using Jim Morrison's from the Morrissey Hotel Band, right? We just talked about that.
Yeah.
His booth and all this stuff. So it was kind of cool. So I'm bouncing back and forth to L.A. It was exciting. Then we went on tour.
Yeah.
And she needed a keyboard player. And Amy's a great piano player. So she's like, well, I'll have Amy play keyboards, and then you guys can be the opening bands. It was like the most random thing. Raging Teens Rockabilly Band opening for Mary Lou Lord and her indie rock band. And
right.
We're playing shows with Slim Dunlap and the Replacements and Tommy Stinson and
crazy.
Elliott Smith. Elliott was like Mary Lou's buddy. He used to, when I first met her, he used to come sleep on the couch.
Yeah.
And he was a really nice guy, and obviously very talented. I wasn't usually into that kind of stuff, but I liked what he did. You know?
Yeah, definitely.
And he believe it or not, he was actually, despite his untimely death, he was a very funny guy.
Yeah.
And he almost played drums for the bass for the Raging Teens once because we had a gig in New York, and Jim, I forget why Jim wasn't there yet or something had happened, but we got out in the van, but Jim hadn't come. We had the bass, but Jim hadn't shown up, and we're on in like 30 minutes. He's not there, and Elliott's like, well, I'll play bass. So we're like literally backstage, like trying to like him get the hang of the upright, and and then at like the 11th hour, Jim came waltzing through the door. So, but he was fine. I remember we went out one night in Boston, with like me and Mary Lou, and Elliot's with us, and I'm with Dana from the Racketeers. And me and Dana have always had this long-running thing where we can just go for hours just being goofy and talking about funny. Dana's one of the funniest people I know, right? So he had this thing for a while where he wanted to bring the word gay back, like to its original meaning. So he would be like, guys that were super into like Star Trek or Star Wars, he's like, they're really space gay, right? This whole thing. So like if you were really into like the Patriots, you'd be Patriots gay.
Right,
you know
right.
what I mean? And Elliot was like a pretty like progressive guy, part of that whole scene, like very much a feminist. And, even though he and I liked each other, I think he was kind of like, what's up with this guy? So Mary Lou told me that he called her aside and was like, what's up with Dana and his friend, Kevin and his friend Dana, like making like gay jokes? And she's like, no, they're not making gay jokes. Like, so she had to explain the whole thing. So I remember we were out like the next night or something, and I made a comment about something. He goes, you're really rockabilly gay.
Elliot Smith said that?
Yeah, Elliot Smith.
Awesome.
So I was like, he gets it. All right, cool. So he was fun. He used to come to our house, and I actually have somewhere, what did I do with it? I have the 4-track. He used to use it at our house all the time.
Oh,
he used
really?
to stay with us and make demos.
Oh,
In
that's
fact, Mary
crazy.
Lou has a cassette tape somewhere of he sent her a song with a sheet of lyrics. Yeah. And he's like, here's a song. I don't think I like it. It's yours if you want it. Because he had given her some songs before. Yeah. And she just recently found it. So she's got the lyrics, the handwritten lyrics on this like, BASF cassette tape. Yeah. And it's Miss Misery.
Oh, really?
And he was like going to give it to her because he didn't like it.
That's crazy.
His famous line was like, he gave her that Figure You Out song. Yeah. And he goes, I don't like it. It sounds too much like the Eagles, and I don't want to think about Glenn Fry going down the road trying to loosen his load. That was Elliot's humor for you,
That's
right?
amazing.
Funny guy. So things started blowing up. It was weird. It's the 90s, and that was kind of like the last gasp of the music industry, really.
Right? Yeah.
Like there was like stupid money being thrown around. Yeah. Like everyone, and we were all getting in on it. It was great.
Yeah.
We're out in L.A. with Mary Lou's band and the Raging Teens opening, and we're playing at the Troubadour, right? Yeah. And they have like all these record company guys come, and the van looks like shit because Mary Lou had hired all these guys that were like buddies from the North Shore, and they just really didn't give a shit about the way they looked, or they thought they probably looked cool because it looked very 1987. You know what I mean? Time stands still up here, as you know. Right. So this dude Dave, who was her guitar player, is a great guy. He lives in Middleton. Great, beautiful voice, great singer, great guitar player. Absolutely could give us zero shits about his outward appearances. Yeah. I think he was wearing like some kind of Buttafuoco pants. Oh, God. And like a Steve Vai Guitar Gods t-shirt, which was like 8 sizes too big, and he'd cut the sleeves off. He probably got it free for buying a pack of strings at the store. And like he was like, what's a shirt, right? Yeah. So we're like, the band looks like shit. Here's like, everyone got $300 to go shopping, right? Yeah. And we're like, all right, this is great. We're going to go down to Melrose and go shopping. So everyone, we get down there, like everyone splits up. And Mary's like, will you do me a favor? Will you take Dave? Because I'm a little worried about decisions he might make in the clothing department. So will you go and like try and give him a hand, So I go with him. We're going to like all these stores. He's super into like 60s stuff. Like he named his kid Sid, like SYD for Sid Barrett, And I was like, Dave, what about this? I'm finding these kind of like, those military tunic things. I'm thinking like, this is kind of a cool, like a Hendrix look. And he's like, I don't know. He's really getting like uncomfortable about the whole thing. So finally I'm like, listen, am I kind of freaking you out? Like, is it weird that we're going clothes shopping, 2 guys? He's like, yeah, it's kind of freaking me out, man. I just want to kind of do my thing. And we're like, all right, dude, you know what? All good. Yeah. Do your thing. Yeah, we've talked about some ideas. I think you're on the right track, right? So we get back to the hotel. It's like later that night. And we're all having some drinks, and everyone's like showing off their outfits, like going in the bedroom, like trying out, check this out, like someone got a leather jacket, and like all this crazy stuff. So Dave's sitting in the corner really quietly. Yeah. And so I think Mary Lou was like, so Dave, what's the story, man? Did you get anything? He's like, yeah, I got something. Has this big brown paper bag. Yeah. Opens it up. A bong. He bought a bong, and we all died laughing. We're like, that's the best. We're like, we love you, Dave. Fuck the record company guys. Don't ever change for nobody, man. It was great. So the other thing he did was we got an endorsement for Dr. Martens.
Yeah.
So like you get, this is before the internet. So you get like the chick came out with like the catalog, and we all got to like pick which ones we wanted and like send it in, and like they were going to arrive like a week later at like somewhere on the tour.
Yeah.
So everyone's buying like I think I bought like a pair of like the 3-button shoes. And I think Amy bought some like black and white kind of like those broke Dr. Martens or whatever. Mm-hmm. Everyone's getting like kind of normal, kind of cool stuff for the 90s. Right. Dave buys these boots, man, that look like they would have been the envy of any goth in the world. They were like these big knee-high boots with like big metal like things across the front, and we're like, that's kind of weird. Like, what's that all about? Does Dave have like a secret side we don't know about? Like, we were all totally puzzled by this.
X-Night.
Yeah, right? We couldn't figure it out. And then he never wore them. We never saw him wear them once. So we were like, what the fuck's that all about? So fast forward like 3 months, we're back home, and we used to, he lives in Middleton, and he's kind of like out in the country. He's got a barn behind his house. Yeah. So we used to rehearse there. So I go over there one day, and his wife, Lynn, I'm like, where's Dave? She's like, he's on his dirt bike. He comes flying around the corner. He's got the boots on.
For like...
Totally pragmatic. He's like, oh, I figured they'd be great for out in the woods, Fucking love that guy, right? Brilliant.
You're still friends with him?
Oh, yeah. We keep in touch. Mainly. He plays around every once in a while. He plays with, what's that gal's name? Is Brian Mays, the kind of keyboard guy? He's older. Yeah. His daughter has a band, and Dave plays with her. Oh, okay. He's a lovely guy. He's super talented. He's great. Nice. But I just admired the hell about him, because we're all trying to make it, in L.A., man, and like, which is so hilarious in hindsight, because I remember, Mary Lou left Kill Rock Stars to be on the Work Group, which was essentially Sony Records, and we did this show at Spaceland in L.A., and it's like this ultimate all-day hipster fest of like Elliott Smith and Mary Lou and like, John Bryan and all these people, like the ultimate indie cool thing. Right. So we're out front chatting, and these kids come up to Mary Lou, and they're like really questioning her integrity about like leaving, Kill Rock Stars and joining a major label, right? And so she's going on about like, no, I think it's a good move, and here's why. And she's explaining like that her A&R guy is totally cool, and blah blah blah. Right as she finishes saying it, it's like red Porsche convertible pulls up with Tim Devine, her A&R guy. Yeah. Classic quintessential Hollywood A&R dude. Right. Stripper chick in the passenger seat with massive fake cans. He's like, all right, so who needs a drink? And these kids just looked at him, looked at her, and just walked away. It was brilliant, That's awesome. Like, if they ever make a hot like that scene, would have to be in the movie, because it's fucking hilarious, man. So
I was at a red light in L.A. one day, and a guy pulled up next to me. It's like the middle of the night in Hollywood. Yeah. And red light guy pulls up with the top down, blasting Boz Skaggs, that the whatever, Lowdown.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is the most LA thing I've ever seen in my life.
It's funny, like that's such a weird town, man. I quite like going out there now, because I've actually met people that are from there.
Right.
But when I was going out there then, and like the scene that she was certainly in, it was just like, it was like there was so much douchebaggery going on. Oh, yeah. You know what I mean? And like it was almost like a comedy thing that you could almost count on it, And you could also totally work it to your advantage. You could you go to like the Sony warehouse with a shopping cart.
Oh yeah.
Like, I've been really looking for like all 30 of these box sets that you just have taken sell down the street at the used record store. Yeah. So we're all milking it, We got like I remember Mary Lou did this EPK thing, this electronic press kit thing. Yeah. And they had these guys from Sony, but like they had just done one for the Rolling Stones like the week before. Right. So they're like, well, it's just going to be a 3-day thing. It's not going to be like major production like that. But we want to because she'd started playing in the subway, They wanted to film her in the subway. Right. So basically they were going to like follow us around for 3 days. Right. So they're like, okay, well, if we're going to go down and play in the subway, that's important. Is there anything we need to know about? Like, is there anything like there could be any unforeseen obstacles that like you might not be able to play? And she's like, well, if you go down there and there's like some dude playing, like the banjo dude's playing, right? Sometimes she's like, I can kind of haggle with him and say, hey, listen, I know you're not going to make that much tonight. What if I throw you like 20? You think that could get you out of here? Right. And the guy, I never forget this. The guy at Sony turns to like these. There's like a guy in charge. I think he goes. So make sure you take 20,000 for incidentals. And she's like, no, I mean like $20. $20. And he's like, well, just take that, just in case. It's like, so we got 20 grand. So I remember I'm bullshitting the guys like, we're filming this busking scene. Well, it's like, there's got to be some money in the box, man. It's not going to look right if it's not fucking throwing money in. We're just milking it, because, and I'm glad we did, because I think she told me she still gets statements from them that she owes them like $1.7 million or something ridiculous. Yeah. So, like, they're not coming to collect, so who gives a shit, right? So,
the 90s, though, yeah.
But it's all changed now. Then that doesn't exist. I don't think bands get signed anymore. Do you know? Do you hear of anybody just?
Not really. I think, it's just pop stars now, and
there's like 10 things.
But I like that though, because it's now back to
everything being DIY.
People sort of building a catalog of music, maybe, or.
But the problem, yes and no, though. The problem with that is, from the other side of the spectrum, is you're right. It's kind of cool if it's not like, if you want to do it, it's very DIY again, right? Yeah. Which is great, except for the fact, if you were in a hardcore band or a punk rock band back in the day, you scrape your money together, you make this like thing, you put out a 45.
Yeah.
People are going to be psyched and they're going to buy them.
Yeah.
I've got like 1,000, I call them coasters in there, fucking CDs. No one wants that shit. You know what I mean?
Right? Yeah, physical media.
They don't want it, you know? And forget the streaming because you don't make any money from that.
Right.
So it's like, so what is the answer? I don't know. Like, we do okay with vinyl nowadays. That's kind of coming back a little bit. But it's like, it costs so much to make, you can't make any money off it. So, and kids, they don't want to pay for music. This generation is of the impression that it's a free commodity.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, my daughter's, now she's going to be 19 in a couple weeks, and she's making records and playing shows, and she's into vinyl because she can go buy it used and cheap, you know?
Yeah.
But they download everything. She's like, I don't even want to download it. I just want to stream it. You know, which I get. I don't want I don't want an iPod. Who cares if I can pay I'm guilty. I pay the Spotify thing.
I do too. Yeah.
And I'm disappointed because there's a lot of stuff on it that I might like. But there's enough on there you can get by, right? So, and every month it seems to have more. So, but they don't pay any money.
Right. Yeah.
So what is the musician supposed to do? The money's shittier now than it was, in the 90s.
Right.
It's like, crazy. I mean, like dollar and cents wise, you're getting less, you know?
Yeah.
So
the Raging Teens from then sort of went after the 90s.
Yeah, well, we kind of fizzled out because Shuby left the band because he got pinched by the Bosstones to be like Joe the Kid's drum tech.
Yeah.
First they asked me if he'd go out on a tour, and they were absolutely blowing it up at that point. I mean, they're doing like they had a hit record and they're like a big deal band. So they basically were like, "Hey, we can give you a salary and you can." This is a kid that when we first went on tour in the Raging Teens, he'd never been He'd been to New Jersey once with his family when he was a kid.
Right.
Other than that, it had been like it had been New Hampshire, and he'd been to Boston a handful of times, right? So, he's getting this chance to like basically go all over the world. So he's like, guys, I'm gonna leave and take this job. And so we were like, that's totally cool, and good for him because that job led to a job with the Alkaline Trio, and then he became like the head like crew guy for Black Eyed Peas and Fergie.
Oh yeah.
That dude's been to like the White House and the Super Bowl and shit. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
Damn, so someone else is this panned out for, not me, right? But
yeah.
So he left, and we had Dana. Dana was playing with us from the Racketeers for a while, but it was just never quite the same. And my daughter was quite young at the time, and I was just like, you know what, I don't think I want to be doing this anymore. Like I want to do it here and there, but I want to like, figure out. My ex-wife decided she didn't want to play music anymore, so it was like someone's going to make a living here. Yeah. So, I kind of gave it up for. I always played here and there, but it wasn't like we weren't actively playing. So. Right. We kind of took time off from that, and then it's probably about 9 years later, maybe even 10 years, I don't know. I remember I was at TT's, ironically, and I was hanging out with Barrence Whitfield.
Yep.
And he said to me, I was just saying, like he was asking me if I'd been playing at all, and I said no, I don't really have a band anymore. He's like, why do you need a band for? He's like, just make a record.
Yeah.
It's like, make a record, pick the best guys you know. He goes, if you make a record, they'll give you a band. You want to go travel and stuff, they'll provide it, you know? Yeah. So I was like, that's a great idea, Barrence. So I did. I went and made a record with Judd from The Crowns and Johnny Shash on bass, Jerry Miller on guitar, who's like, guy's like a national treasure.
Yeah.
So I made it was just like an EP, like a 5 or 6 song EP.
Right.
And I sent it out to a bunch of people just willy-nilly, and I got, that was the first Jittery Jack recordings. Okay. And I got... Tom Ingram, who books Viva Las Vegas, the big rockabilly weekender, messaged me and was like, hey, listen, I got your disc. I really like it. And we've had a cancellation. Like, would you want to come out in like 3 weeks and play a show?
Right.
And of course I was like, totally.
Yeah.
And then I was like, shit, I don't have a band.
Right.
So I called my buddy Deke Dickerson up, and I asked, I was like, Deke, you're going to be there, right? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, I was like, well, I got offered this thing, and, I agreed to it, but I don't have a band.
Right.
So he kind of laughed. He was like, okay, sure. And I was like, listen, I'll pay you guys. But so he played guitar. This guy of ours, Dave Wolf, from who I'd known from Minneapolis on Racketeers tours, now lived in Texas. He played bass, and Chris Sugarball Sprague, who's now in Low Straitjackets, was on drums, which was cool because I'd known Sugarball. So he used to make a band called the Sprague Brothers. Or me and Matt Murphy used to call them the Sprague Brothers. We used to tour them in the 90s with the Raging Teens. So he was a pal. So I went out and I did it, and it went well. It was a lot of fun, and this guy Reb Kennedy from Wild Records, who were based out of L.A., saw the show and asked me if I wanted to come out and make a record, and I was like, all right. My kid's like older now, I'm divorced. She lives with me, but I'm with my mom, and my mom's helping out, So I'm like, well, I can go do stuff again, So I was gonna go out there just on my own, and they were gonna like give me a band, and I wrote like all these songs for this record, and then like 2-3 weeks before, Reb called me up and was like, hey, so it's not going to work out to have that lineup back you up because the guitar player, this guy Omar Romero, who's great.
Yeah.
He's got something going on. He's not going to be able to do it. Like, is there a guitar player in Boston that you think that would kind of drop everything to come to LA in a couple of weeks and make a record? And I was like, Amy, you want to go to LA and make a record? She was like, sure, because she's always game to do whatever, So she got on a plane with me. We went to LA. We made a record. It was fun. It was, it was fun to kind of be back and doing it. The label was like, we always felt a little bit out of place because I was a little bit older than everyone, I think, and and they're all, a large segment of their label is like Mexican American kids, which is totally cool. It's just I don't really know anything about that culture at all. Right. You know what I mean? We've since become really good pals with some people out there, which is great.
Yeah.
But I will always be thankful to Reb because Reb, I was kind of in the wilderness a little bit. I made that EP.
Yeah.
But Reb kind of saw something and was like, hey, you want to come out? So we made that record for Wild Records. And even though we might not have been the best fit for the label at the end of the day, I will always be thankful to him for kind of, putting me back out in the front line, if you will.
Yeah.
And from there, it just kind of took off. We ended up making another record. We recorded it in Boston. And same format, just me and Amy. Because at that point, I realized after playing with her again how much I missed playing with her.
Yeah.
And she's like my best friend too. So it's not like it was like, this is really cool. We can travel together and work together. It's really fun. There's a cool dynamic between the two of us. So so we did that and made another record. We've gone to Europe a bunch of times now. So now I'm pretty busy, and my kids left the nest. I'm an empty nester.
Yeah.
So I'm actually now just trying to like juggle ways to do music as full-time as I can and be as flexible as I can so I can get go on tour and whatever. But it's so hard taking a band on the road. There's no money, it's the money's worse than it was the 90s. It really is. So when everything else costs 4 times more. So we've kind of decided that we're working on this kind of like duo thing, like nobody panic, it's not going to be like Simon and Garfunkel or something, but it's like for like the smaller markets and stuff, we can travel on our own and just do like kind of a duo thing, a little bit more mellow, maybe a little more country. Yeah. And then in the bigger markets, we have buddies. We can like use a pickup rhythm section, which is what we do. Anywhere we fly, just the two of us go. And we use a pickup rhythm section. So it's great. I've got guys like West Coast guys, and I've got European guys and Canadian guys. And we went to Australia last year. I got Australian guys now. So it's cool. And we send them the stuff. It's all very modern. You can email the tunes and get there to do a little rehearsal. So that's going to be our game plan for next year, is to try and scale things down a little bit, because it's a lot cheaper and easier to take 2 people out on the road. It's one hotel room. It's like, it's 2 mouths to feed versus 4. And, and because it's not a band per se, I'm sort of, it's not like we're all in this thing together. It's my gig, so I'm like, I got to pay people. You know what I mean? So, so this way. And Amy's great. She's happy for like, she's easily pleased. If she can eat well and travel and see things and play guitar, she's happy. So that's good. So that's what we're doing now. That's where we're at. And we did a Raging Teens reunion. Last year at the Shake Up. It was the 20th anniversary at the band, which was kind of crazy. And we at the New England Shake Up, we did a reunion. It was a lot of fun. So we decided to do another one in December, because December was the band basically had the first gig in December. So we did it in town. And it was such a big success that we were like, my friend Beck, who runs the New England Shake Up, just started this label called Swell Tune Records. She asked us if we'd want to make a 45. So I wrote a couple songs, one being called The Drinking Age, because the band is 21 now, right? So we recorded that over the summer, and that's coming out December 9th. So we're playing a show December 9th.
Nice.
And at Great Scott. So that's going to be fun. And then we get all kinds of stuff planned. We're doing, out-of-town stuff, January, February, March, April, probably Europe in the summer. So we're just trying to stay busy, keep the dream alive.
Yeah, it seems like the genre of your music, which I just call rock and roll. Like at the end of the day, it's rockabilly roots, whatever. But at the end of the day, it's
rock and roll.
Rock and roll.
Absolutely, yeah.
Bill Haley and
sure, Bill Haley wasn't a rockabilly artist, and even though Gene Vincent claimed he was at times, he really wasn't. it was more of a rock and roll sound, you know. And I like a lot of stuff like the Sparkle Tones and stuff like that. You know, the rockabilly thing is pretty small. It's like Charlie Feathers, and you know, it's very sort of distinctive. It's very southern and very tribal. It wasn't. It's not really white guys mimicking black rock and roll,
right.
Which is what most of the '50s rock and roll stuff was. You know, it was its own little hybrid. I love it. But I don't claim to be like the quintessential rockabilly artist because I don't think I am. I think I'm more of a rock and roll guy. So
I see like Johnny Otis kind of too in you, like at least the live.
Yeah, sure. All right, I'll take that. That's a compliment. I'll pay you later.
But yeah, I feel like that a lot of that like Western swing rockabilly, it can all.
Sure, it's a pretty broad thing. You know what I worry about right now with what we're doing. Is my kid's a great example of this. The crowd's just getting older and older.
Yeah.
You know, we've gone past the crowd being like, well, 10 years ago, well, no one's coming out because they got kids.
Right.
No one's coming out. The kids are grown now. They just don't go out anymore. You know.
Yeah.
And our thing is not cool.
Yeah.
The young kids. My daughter is funny. She's like, you think you're really cool, but you're not. You know. It's just it's the original cool. How can you not see it's cool? But I think they have this thing. It's like this like weird, cheesy fucking Happy Days thing or something. You know.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I get that. Why you might think that if you don't know anything about that.
Right. That
I can
whole
see
genre. And
you know.
Do you ever feel like limited with like? Have you ever wanted to play like, anything not metal or so, but like any other kind of genres of?
Well, yes and no. I have dabbled in doing other things for the years. I'm just not a very good guitar player, and I'm not very good. I'm not a really great musician, period. And so I would struggle doing something like that, to be honest with you. And it's not the thing that excites me. Like this is the music that really excites me. I really. You know, I like lots of stuff.
Yeah.
But I always equate like primitive rock and roll is like, let's say it's electricity, right? Like it's a current, if you will. Like Rush is like a fucking advanced circuit board, right?
Yeah.
50s rock and roll, like whether it be Little Richard or something like that, it's a fucking bare wire hanging out on the wall with sparks shooting out of it. Yeah. It's like the building block. Right. You know what I mean? It's about as raw and as basic as you can get. And to me, that's what makes it exciting. You know, and I like it to be done as purely as possible. You know, I mean, there's a lot of people that do hybrid stuff. You know, I like the Stray Cats back in the day because I thought they had good songs.
Yeah.
But it's a little corny. I don't really, and it's a hybrid. It's like I always. Like the psychobilly thing, you know. When I was a kid in England, my sister I think she dated the dude who was like the tour manager for the Meteors.
Yeah.
So those guys. Sorry, Lisa, for ratting you out, but the band used to sleep in the shed behind her house. So I'd be like 10 playing on my train set, and like the Meteors are hanging out in the freaking living room, and I'm like,
crazy.
"Of cool, like, okay, what's up, guy?" You know, like I want to hang with the guys, right? So, but I wasn't never that crazy about them. It was exciting and it was kind of fun when I was younger, but I always felt like it was like bastardizing a music form of like, because you couldn't play it very well, you mix two things together.
Yeah.
The easiest way, so it's like mixing punk rock with like rock and roll or rockabilly. I like both of those things.
Yeah.
But I like milk and I like orange juice too. I don't like them together. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So maybe that makes me like kind of silly and stuck up, and because I do like things that branch out. But for this kind of music, I'm not a big fan of like, just. I'm not OCD. It's not like that.
Right.
I don't mind certain things that blend, but like I like the two-tone ska stuff, which is second generation. It's certainly not traditional Jamaican ska, which I like a lot too. But just for me, that's the thing that I like. And there are some people that do it and do it well.
Yeah.
There's some fun bands out there that do that kind of take little snippets of it and mix it up, and that's kind of cool. I can dig it. And I certainly don't knock anyone trying to make a buck because being in like a 50s rock and roll or rockabilly band is really the financial kiss of death. You know, there's fucking no money.
Yeah.
Some people get pushed back like, well, they're selling out. It's like fucking good for them. No one's buying. I'll wear a tutu on stage if someone's gonna fuck. Do we need a new Lux, man? I'll wear the fucking tights and the shit. But no one's buying. So.
But you can kind of, I feel like in this scene, if you, I wouldn't really call it a scene, but the genre. There's so many. It seems like you're always playing festivals all the time, so it seems like that.
Yeah, it's pretty
vibrant with and just.
It's a healthy scene. The problem is the scene's getting older. The Southern California scene's pretty good. Yeah. Because there's a lot of younger like sort of like Mexican American kids that get really. I think they're really into it because they got great hair.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They don't bald.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like they can really go for it. But so that scene's pretty cool. But around the globe, it's starting to just get kind of older. But I suppose that happens. I'm sure like the original in England, for example, the original Teddy Boy guys in the 50s, once the 70s came around, they were like, what the hell is all this?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so I'm just waiting for that day that, and the old guys are dying off one by one. I'm waiting for me to be the old guy.
Right.
I want that satin jacket, baseball cap, bad mustache tour.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where I just get flown out, like, what? Who are these people? Where's my walker?
Yeah.
So, you know, it's nice. But as my friend Sean Mencher said, who's a great guitar player, lives in Maine, he was in the band High Noon.
Yeah.
He said, the rockabilly world is a vast ocean that's as deep as a puddle. And it's totally true. Like, I can go to any town USA and I can get a gig.
Yeah.
And if there might be 50 people there, 100 people, and there's never, ever going to be more than those people there. That's it. No one else is coming. You know what I mean? So, you know, and there are certain markets do a little bit better, but not really.
Right.
You know, that's it. So
I remember someone saying the rockabilly scene is like a retirement home for white power guys. Which, you know, I think they more mean skinheads than
skinheads.
white,
Yeah, well, I've heard it too about like it's the punk rock retirement home. I've heard that too.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. But it's.
I tell you, I played a gig in Germany one time where I remember my buddy Deke warned me about it and said, you know, it's highly illegal to own any kind of like Nazi paraphernalia.
Yeah, yeah.
He goes, so they've all kind of embraced the stars and bars.
Yeah, yeah.
So he goes, if you see that shit going on. He goes, it's not the same in England because the English guys kind of thought it was like this Southern music rebel thing. They didn't really get it. And there's still a big battle about that going on. But apparently this thing in Germany, it was a thing. We fucking get to this club and it's like someone had painted the place with like rebel flag paint.
Oh,
something.
really?
Like,
oh,
and this guy, the only things he could say in English was Gene Vincent and Ku Klux Klan. So we did our set, got the fuck out of there. But, you know, but that's not the case for the most part. I mean, it's black music, you know, so... So, you know, you like any scene, you're going to get that. I'd say way more in the punk rock scene.
Yeah, that's what I've always said with rockabilly. I said, I can't imagine that because it's all blues-based rock music that was so...
Well, which is the irony with this whole skinhead thing, too, because it's like the original skinheads were into fucking, like, Jamaican ska.
Yeah, exactly.
Rocksteady and stuff. It's like, that wasn't until, like, the late 70s and 80s, like, morons, you know, kind of put this ideology with it and took it over, you know, which is... Now it's like skinhead. The evil skinhead. It's like, what?
I know. There was, and there was that period, and that's sort of when I got out of the skinhead thing was...
You get lumped into that.
Yeah, the fact that you have to explain that, oh, there's actually another kind of skin is...
Yeah, this is really what it is.
And the other thing was I was more of a progressive, like, so I didn't really... I wasn't a violent guy. I wasn't a...
Yeah.
And I don't know, I wasn't that much into oi and that kind of stuff.
Sure, yeah. I remember me and Dana were out one day, and there was a dude drove by in a truck, pickup truck, and he had, like, the, you know... the Nazi symbol with the red thing and the no Nazis.
Yeah, yeah.
And Dana's like, was there anyone that's really for them at this point? Right, is it really necessary to have that? You know, like, like if you had the actual thing on there, like, okay, well, that's a statement. That's just like, you know, is the fucking sky blue?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I you know, like, of course no one wants that. That's a dumb thing to even have on your fucking truck, you know?
There was a 2-week period where I saw a different white power guy at Stop and Shop in Beverly here. North Beverly, and the first time I remember, it was a guy with his wife, you know, and I recognized him actually. I won't say his name, but he's you probably know who he is too. But and then the next time I saw a guy and he was paying for his groceries, he had a big 88 tattoo on his hand.
Oh boy,
and the whole deal. But he had like his. She's like, "Oh, do you have a Stop and Shop card?" And he had the keychain with all the seat, and I just remember thinking how absurd that was. This guy's like this, you know, I hate Jews and I hate, you know, this and that. But he's like, oh, I like to, you know, I want to make sure I get my
discount.
Discount on my stuff here. And
yeah, I mean, it's
sad.
I never really experienced much of that. Even like back when I was, you know, going to punk shows and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew it was around, but like,
yeah, I didn't think it was as.
I think it was like most things. It was just something that got like a. It's just something that like people like the press or whoever like ran with it and made it a thing. I don't think I ever met one.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
You know?
There was a couple and
if there was like, I mean, I trust me, I have racist friends in the past, sure, you know, but it was more like, you know, I was thinking older, like, yeah, you're being a jackass. Come on, dude. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, you're right. You know, I grew up in a small town and I'm just now reminded, you know?
We see it all the time.
Exactly. But not like, they're not like branding 88s on themselves and like, you know, looking to start the fourth fucking Reich. You know? I never really ran into any of that. You know, it's that just didn't really exist. So you know, but I guess it was out there in the early '90s and stuff. But I was very removed from that scene.
Yeah.
So they weren't coming to Dead Milkman shows.
No,
or the Dead for that matter either.
Yeah,
right?
I know, right? Yeah, it's crazy. And I guess just to end it, So your daughter plays music, and
she does. Yeah, she's
I went
great.
and saw her with you maybe a year or two ago at Kodo in Salem, and it was one of those like, your friend is talking up his kid playing music, but she's actually very talented, and
she's
so
great. She's been busking now too.
Yeah,
which is great. So people might see her out in Harvard Square or Park.
Nice.
Winter's coming, she's playing in Park Street.
Yeah,
but she's a great guitar player. She five-finger picks. She's a great songwriter. And she's very prolific. She's constantly writing. Like she has a record out, which I think is great. But she's like, please, I wrote that when I was like 16. I'm 18 now, right? So, but she's into like really. My record collection is like rapidly shrinking because she's just stealing them all,
taking stuff,
which is fine. Take it, have at it, And but she's super into like. She's all over the map. Like she loves like Elliott Smith's obviously her favorite,
Right.
So it's a real shame that she never got to meet him. But she one of her prized possessions is she has a picture of her mom pregnant with Elliott, and then they did a memorial show for Elliott. Like Annabelle was like about 14. She went out to New York, and Mary Lou took her with her, and she went out and she played.
Oh, nice.
And Elliott's sister gave her Elliott's guitar strap.
Really?
So she's got that. So she's
that's
like,
amazing. But
she's into like she loves like the Zombie. She likes a lot of 60s stuff.
Nice.
She went to see the Jesus and Mary Chain last night. She's into
good.
a lot of like weird, a lot of indie rock stuff, and she's all over the map. But she's very open minded, which is good. So, so who knows? With the she's at college because I told her if you want to be a musician, find a way to make a living because it's very hard. But she's studying music therapy, which I got to be honest. When she first told me that, I thought it was like fucking basket weaving or something. Right. You know what I mean? I was like, what? Being a guy from Massachusetts, music, what?
Yeah.
That T-word we don't talk about. But apparently it's quite a burgeoning thing. So, nice. She actually might be able to make a living doing that and incorporate playing music with work, which is always cool, I guess. And then, and play gigs. She's done some touring and she's making another record now. And hopefully they find a way to like repackage music in a format that you have to buy it again, and she can become what will it be? I don't know, holograms or something. Like I don't know what that's going to be, but if they figure it out, hopefully she's at that cusp. She gets in on it, and
she can help support you. And
in my old age, I'm going to need some fucking taken care of, right? That's
Definitely,
a true story, man. So
well, thanks for doing this, man.
Thanks for having me, man. I love your podcast, so I hope that I was entertaining enough that people won't be like, who the heck fuck's this guy?
Yeah. And you said December 9th, Great Scott.
December 9th at Great Scott, we will be the Raging Teens reunion. We're playing, it's a Swelltune Records night, so because that's who's putting the record out. Bloodshot Bill from Canada.
Yeah.
Nate Gibson, who's originally from Boston.
Yeah.
Nate wrote the Start A record label book about the label.
Yeah.
They interviewed like Willie Nelson. The book's awesome.
Yeah.
And he's originally from Boston. He made a record with Rex Trailer. Remember the TV, the Boston TV cowboy?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He made a record with him back in the 90s, and he has a big song about Necco wafers. He's really into Necco wafers. So he's got a new 45 coming out too the same day.
Yeah.
And then Sean Mention from High Noon's on the bill too. So it's going to be a really fun, old school rock and roll show at the Great Scott.
All right.
And we'll have a good time. Hopefully people come out.
Cool. Thanks, man.
All right, brother.